Yes, Pastor Mark and Loran are gone. One thing that I really appreciate about them is they work harder than anyone I've ever met. And me and Tim have to force them to take vacation because literally they just, eat, breathe, and sleep sunrise. And, sometimes I'll come here because I forgot something and it'll be 11 o'clock at night and I forgot my keys. I come back to my office. They're just in their offices, working. And what are you doing? Are you going to go home? Oh yeah, at some point. So anyways, they're on a well-deserved vacation. They went to Mississippi for a while. I believe now they're in Illinois. And so this morning you are stuck with me for the next half hour. Chances are that when you hear the word overwhelmed, you probably associate it with some negative feelings. You're probably thinking about being overworked, maybe overstressed, just too many things to do with too little time, resources, or energy. Anyone feeling like that this morning? But really, overwhelmed, it can be a good or a bad thing depending on your perspective. So about a month and a half ago, my son Noah, he turned 2. And so we had a birthday party for him. And so we had people over to our house, and he was actually down for a nap when people started coming. And so we had 15, 20 people crammed in our living room. And all of a sudden I heard Noah had woken up. And so I went in there and I was like, hey, Noah, there's a bunch of people here to see you. And just to let you know a little bit about my son Noah, he's a huge attention hog, huge extrovert. And so he's all excited. So he starts running down the hallway cheering for himself. And he runs into this circle of 15, 20 people. And he just has his hands like this. He just starts spinning, just big smile on his face. And but something starts happening. Every time he finishes a spin, his smile diminishes just a little bit. And finally, about the second or third time around, he just bursts out in tears. And there was nothing wrong. He was just overwhelmed because all of a sudden he realized how many people were there. But there's a good sense of the word overwhelmed too. Think about, maybe you're at the stage or you've been at that stage. Think about a new relationship. Okay, when you get into a brand new relationship, you were just overwhelmed with affection for that person. You're just overwhelmed in spending time with that person. You just want to spend every second of the day. And then when they drive away, they've been gone 5 minutes, you're texting them I miss you so much, I miss you too. And it's just this nonstop, and that changes after a while. Doesn't mean that you love or care about the person any less, but that dynamic changes. I've been married 6-7 years now, and we got 2 kids, and I've started to really value my moments of escape. Any of you know this? So my place is when I take a shower. I've always loved showers. That's my 10 minutes, that's my me time. And so I go in there, and I really get frustrated if someone's banging on the door trying to ask me questions. Leave me alone. This is me time. This is escape time. And so I've really started to value those moments of escape. And there was a man in the Bible, Moses, and from the Old Testament, and he would escape as well. Moses was a representative between the Israelites, God's chosen people, and God. And so Moses, he would escape, and he would go up on the mountainside to spend time in God's presence and to hear from him. And so he would go up there and he would escape. And what would happen is that he would actually just spend time there, and he would try to receive instructions from God, and then he would go down and deliver those to the Israelites. But what happened is that as Moses was spending time up on the mountain in the overwhelming presence of God, his physical characteristics would actually change, and he would be shining or glowing. And so Moses comes off this mountainside to give these instructions to the Israelites, and his face is glowing. If I was the Israelite, I'd probably be a little bit creeped out. Moses just had this radioactive, interaction. But anyways, he came back and he would do that. And what a cool picture that is of his physical characteristics being changed from being in the overwhelming presence of God. Husbands, I have a specific challenge for you this morning. Imagine what it would do to your family dynamic if you went and spent time in the presence of God for the explicit purpose of trying to receive instructions and then taking those instructions and implementing it in your family. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what worship is and what worship is not this morning. And we're going to be talking a lot about music. We're going to be talking about how music can manipulate us, but also how some of us are so closed off to expression in our worship and in our music that sometimes we can miss out on experiencing God in that. But as we're talking about music, I want to make it clear that music is just one form of worship. We're going to be talking a lot about music, but I don't want us to think that that is the only way that we worship God, because it's not. There are some people in here this morning, and you refuse to be outworked in anything you do. Colossians 3:23 says that whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, working as for the Lord, not for human masters. So you might be a teacher, you might be an engineer, you might be a stay-at-home mom or dad, a secretary, a pastor, truck driver, whatever it might be. But if you are working with all of your heart, trying to please God, that is worship. That is a form of worship. We also have some extremely generous people here at Sunrise. You spent your entire life earning money, saving money, investing money, giving money. That is a form of worship as well. During my undergrad, I had a professor. His name was Dr. Shaka. And he was from Sierra Leone in Africa originally. And this guy was a character. It's hard to describe, but he was very jovial, very jolly. He was the kind of person where he was constantly making jokes, but he could care less if there was anyone else in the room. Like, he's just making the jokes for himself, cracking himself up. And so anyways, we developed a friendship, him and I, and he became a mentor in my life. And after a while, he invited me to his church. He had started a church in the Twin Cities, and it was an African church. And while visiting the church, it came time for offering. And they did offering a little bit different than I was used to. So offering time came, everybody stood up, everybody moved to the center aisle, they had bongos going, and we danced our way down the aisle to the offering bucket. So I'm like looking side to side, trying to like figure out what dance moves are appropriate and what aren't. There was a lot of this going on, and every once in a while there's like a little spin kind of going on. And so we go down to the center aisle, we drop off our offering, we dance our way back to the aisle, and one of the pastors walks up, bongos are still going, and looks in the offering bucket. He looks at us again. And so we all go to the center aisle again, and we danced our way down to the offering bucket and danced our way back. And God taught me something in that moment because of these people's attitude. And what he taught me is that worship isn't a feeling, it's a response. Whether it's music, whether it's working hard, whether it's giving, it's a response based on who God is and what he's done. It's this overwhelming thankfulness that requires a reaction, a response. Because a lot of times we often use our state of feeling, we use our state of emotion, we use our state of mind to determine what we do. We think that we need to feel a certain way in order to respond how we should. But it's not that way at all. Imagine how many marriages would have been saved had they understood that principle. You don't just love someone when you feel like it. Because what happens when you're fighting and all of a sudden you don't feel like you love that person in that moment? That feeling can't be that go-to catalyst that you need in order to produce a correct response. So Dr. Shaka, he was going to travel in the summer to go to Italy. There had been a group of people from Sierra Leone that had immigrated to Italy, and they wanted to start a church for themselves there. And so he was going to go there, and then he was going to go to his home country, Sierra Leone, and continue to work with a youth center that he had started. And he invited me to come along as an internship. And so I gladly accepted, and the time was coming for us to leave, and so we fly out, and we arrive in Rome. And we started having team building meetings, like 2-3 times a day, and we were meeting with people, we had prayer meetings, we discipled, we delegated responsibilities, we bought instruments, we prayed, we were looking for meeting space for this church to meet, we dreamed together. And one of the things that we did is we bought a keyboard for the church, and we started one of our meetings with worship, and they asked me if I would lead a song from the keyboard, and I only knew one song, and it was Blessed Be Your Name. 4 chords, G, C, D, and E. To this day, I still know 4 chords on the keyboard, G, C, D, and E. So anyways, I accepted. I said, okay, I'll lead a song, and it was a really big mistake. And so I play the song, we go into a time of worship, and they thought the song was really good, but way worse than that, they thought that I was a good musician. Yeah, no. And so anyways, the day's coming where we're about to launch our first Sunday. You know, it's really excited, and we're looking forward to it. And all of a sudden, some of the people, they start pressuring me to do worship for that first Sunday, play keys and sing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I know 4 chords. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, no, you'll be fine. And it was one of those things where eventually they like pressured me into it. And so anyways, the day's fast approaching where this first Sunday is coming up. It's a really important day. And I'm getting really like nervous now. It's one of those instances, where you just like feel like you're on a ledge and like someone's about to push you over. And there's nothing you can do. It's at best case scenario, it's going to be a disaster. And so that's what I'm feeling. This Sunday comes up, and we start going into worship, and sure enough, I got no clue what I'm doing. I'm sweating bullets up there because their style of worship was not the same at all. Leading up to this Sunday, I'd been asking like, hey, can I get like a song list? Oh, no, you'll be fine. Can I get like, what key is it in? Can I get chords, lyrics, anything? Oh, you're going to do great. And they wouldn't give me answers. So anyways, I show up this Sunday. I've got no clue what I'm doing. And thank God that I had control over the sound on the keyboard all the way down. And so I'm up there just like jamming on the keyboard, kind of like mumbling, have absolutely no clue whatsoever of what I'm doing. And I'm just really like nervous and frustrated and sweating bullets. And so I'm up there and God goes, I want you to stop. And so this is like during the worship service. So I like stop playing the keys. I stopped humming or mumbling because I had no idea what the words were. And the songs were not the same as here. Here it's pretty easy to follow along because we do like verse 1, verse 2, chorus, bridge, chorus. That's not the way they're doing it there. You have no idea what's coming next. And so anyways, I stopped playing, I stopped mumbling, and God goes, I want you to just look around. And so I look around, and I just see these people going after God, regardless of what is being sung, regardless of what is being played. And in that moment, I learned that worship is not a result, it's a decision. You see, I'm naturally a results-driven person, so I had always correlated high-quality music with a successful worship experience. And not only that, but I had always thought, well, if I feel good during worship, then that must be success as well. But God taught me in that moment that worship is not a result, it's a decision. It's something you decide to do regardless of what is going on around you. And all of a sudden, it was like this weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I cranked that keyboard up, started jamming on the 4 chords I knew. And to this day, I'm sure that I didn't play a single correct note. I'm sure I didn't sing a single correct lyric. But it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The time came for us to leave, and it was an emotional goodbye. It's crazy how close you can get to a group of people when you're really like living day in and day out with them. And not only that, but when you're driven and drawn together by a common purpose. And so there was lots of crying. The family that housed us the entire time there, they weren't even Christians. They were a Muslim family. And that's a whole sermon in itself. But they showed me hospitality like I haven't experienced any other time. You can go ahead and throw up the picture of our core leadership team. That was our core leadership team and some of the people who came on that first Sunday. Bet you can't find me. It's like the easiest game of Where's Waldo ever. It's like you got a tray of Oreos. Like, let's put a saltine cracker in the back here. So yeah, pretty easy to find me there. So anyways, the time came for us to go. And so we fly out of Rome and we show up in Sierra Leone. And so to give you a little more information about Dr. Shaka, he was the most unorganized person I have ever met in my entire life. And it was through him that I learned the real meaning of the word anointed. We use the word anointed a lot of times when we like something, like, hey, that worship song was really anointed. Hey, that message was really anointed. But in the Bible, anointed means chosen. It was like this lifelong call. So when David was anointed king, he had this lifelong call placed upon his life to lead the Israelites. And so it was through this that I learned that Dr. Shaka was truly anointed, because if he wasn't, there's no way we would have ever even gotten out of the U.S., and there's definitely no way we would have ever gotten back to the U.S. There's just so many logistical things that we kept running into, and I was thinking like, oh my gosh, our trip is gonna stop before it even starts. And he just had this unshakable trust and faith in God. And he would just laugh it off and be like, it'll work itself out. And again it did. And again, this whole time I'm sweating bullets because I am a person who really likes to plan. And him and I are direct opposites in that respect, because he's the kind of person where he doesn't even start planning until he arrives at the destination. Like, I'm not even going to think about it or plan anything until I'm there. So we show up in Sierra Leone, and the next day we find ourselves at the Assemblies of God District Council. And so what this is all the pastors from that country met together for a worship service. And let me tell you, it was one of the most uncomfortable moments in my entire life that I've experienced. And so we were there, and this was an expressive group of people. Now, I would say I'm a pretty expressive Minnesotan, but that's not really saying much, is it? You know, like, our idea of expressive is like someone sprinkles too much pepper in your food, and you think someone's trying to like poison you to death with spice. This was a really expressive group of people. I mean, they were screaming, they were shouting, they were yelling, what looked like to me mosh pitting. And I didn't know if we were trying to like cast demons out or invite them in. And so I'm just like so uncomfortable. And but during this time, there was also this group of people, and there were some people who were singing, some people who were sitting, some people who were praying. And to me, it just looked super chaotic. It was almost like as if everything was doing something different. It seemed like disjointed. And God had another moment with me where he said, you know, worship isn't an emotion, it's an attitude. And you see, sometimes we get caught up and wrapped up in emotion. We say things like, the Spirit was really moving during that song. But sometimes what we actually mean is, I really liked that song. That was my favorite song. I really like those lyrics. It has meaning in my life, and so it was easier for me to kind of let go of everything else and push into God. But even when we are more expressive, ever notice how sometimes it happens in sync with like the chorus and verse? Be like, verse 1, chorus, verse 1, chorus, you know, hands raised. Sometimes that happens. It just probably made some of you self-conscious about how you're going to worship. Now, next time, you're going to be like looking around, seeing who's raising their hands and when. A couple of you are going to decide to be the rebel, like first seconds of the song, like hands up. So God taught me in that moment, it's an emotion, not an attitude. If you can only worship during songs that you like, you're reliant on emotions, not attitude. Attitude drives worship in any place, any time, whether you know the language or not. 1 Corinthians 14 says, if you praise him in the private language of tongues, God understands you, but no one else does, for you are sharing intimacies between you and him. So during my internship, I started getting so frustrated because I constantly didn't know the songs, words, or language that things were being spoken in and sung in. So I started worshiping God in a private language that he gave me that only he understands. When you feel a barrier to worship, that is a time for you to push through it, to worship through it. It is not a time for you to sit back, sit down, and say, I guess I'll worship some other day when I feel more like it. One of the greatest examples of worship can be found in Acts chapter 16. Paul and Silas, they are fellow missionaries, and they're traveling throughout Europe spreading the gospel. Acts 16, verse 16. Once, when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a female slave who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune telling. She followed Paul and the rest of us shouting, these men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. She kept us up for many days. Finally, Paul became so annoyed that he turned around and said to the spirit, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her. And at that moment, the spirit left her. So it's interesting when I was doing some research into this passage of the Bible that a lot of scholars believe that the origin of the word ventriloquist or ventriloquism comes from passages like these. You know, ventriloquists where they got the puppet and they pretend like they're talking through the puppet. I always thought it was a little creepy myself. But anyways, instances like this, these people were demon possessed, and these demons would manifest, and these demons would speak through these people. They would speak out of them. And it would be pretty creepy because it wouldn't be this lady's natural voice. It would be this demon talking through her. And so that's part of the origin of where that word comes from. But anyways, Paul and Silas, they're traveling around and they're sharing the gospel. And this lady is following around kind of, saying things that they're doing. The irony is that even the demons have to actually declare who God is, which I find pretty cool. But anyways, after a couple of days of this, Paul gets kind of annoyed, and he's like, yeah, demon, come out of her in the name of Jesus, and the demon does. On to verse 19. When her owners realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "These men are Jews and are throwing our city into an uproar. They're advocating customs unlawful for us as Romans to accept or practice." The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. After they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in stocks. So these magistrates, they had been profiting off of this demon-possessed lady, and they just lost their moneymaker, and so now they're mad. So they bring Paul and Silas, they bring false accusations against them, and Paul and Silas are beaten up, and they're hit with rods and flogged, and they're thrown into prison, and even have their feet put in stocks. So let's see what their response is. Verse 25. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. All right, hold up. So it's midnight. I'm not surprised that they're not asleep considering what they just went through. It's not like they can pop a few Tylenol PM and call it tonight. Okay, they've just been beaten up with rods. Have you ever stubbed your toe really, really bad, where it hurts so bad and like it's taking everything in you to not say every bad word you've ever heard in your life? So take that amount of pain and apply it to your entire body, and this is probably what Paul and Silas are feeling right now. They are bruised. They might have broken ribs. They probably have internal bleeding somewhere. They might have ruptured kidneys. Not only that, but they put their feet in stocks too, and which was an element of protection, making sure that they couldn't escape. But it was also something that used for torture, because when you got your feet in stocks, you can't ever fully stretch out, and it gets super uncomfortable. And after a while, your muscles start cramping. I still remember I went camping a few years ago with my brother. And the first night we'd been driving, so we just slept in the back of his truck, and it was a 6-foot bed truck. I'm 6'1". Like, that 1 inch isn't gonna make much of a difference. I was wrong. You know, at first it was fine, but throughout the night, I couldn't fully stretch out. And it was one of the worst nights of sleep I've ever had. I still remember it. And I'm telling you that to just let you know that basically me, Paul, and Silas went through the exact same thing. On to verse 26. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of prison were shaken. At once all of the prison doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. They had a law back then that if a prisoner escaped, you as the jail guard would have to trade your life for theirs. So he knew that he was going to get killed anyways. He's like, I might as well do it myself. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here." The jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He brought them out and asked, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" They replied, "Believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household." Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all the others in his house. And at the hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. He immediately and all his household were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. Worship team, you can make your way back up here. I want us to be overwhelmed, but I want us to be overwhelmed with the right things. Worship is more than a feeling, it's a response. Worship is a decision, not a result. Worship is an attitude, not an emotion. We often base the success of worship on how we feel during or after, but worship isn't about us, is it? There's a pastor by the name of Francis Chan. He's written some really good books, and he's got some great sermons on YouTube if you ever have a chance to check them out. But he told a story where he was pastoring at a church, and a random churchgoer came up to him after and said, "I didn't really like worship today." And he said, "That's okay, we weren't worshiping you." And it was a very blunt response, but I really thought that it got to the heart of it, because a lot of times we do think that worship is about us and how it makes us feel. And I don't want to downplay our emotional connection with God. It's amazing when we have those times of worship where we feel close to God, where we feel connected. There's nothing wrong with desiring that, but that should not be the primary reason that we worship. We worship God because he deserves it. What I love about this passage about Paul and Silas is it shows that our worship of God can actually be a starting point of leading others to Jesus. A violent beating led to worship inside of a prison, which led to an entire household coming to know Jesus. So we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to go back into worship. The kind that surpasses language. Don't worry, it'll be in English. The kind where song choice or style doesn't really matter. The kind where we make a decision to respond in an attitude of worship.